Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, in a video and written press statement a few minutes ago, said that the Russian government led by President Vladimir Putin has continued another new week of war against the people of Ukraine with massive assaults on all front lines despite the 30-day ceasefire proposal requested by the United States under the leadership of Donald Trump from both countries. According to Zelenskyy, today, the commander-in-chief provided a report on the battlefield situation. Fighting and our defensive operations continue along almost the entire front line, including many key locations, from the Kharkiv region and the Kupiansk sector to the southern directions. After the talks in Jeddah and the American proposal for a ceasefire on the front line, Russia stole almost another week, a week of war that only Russia wants. We will do everything to further intensify diplomacy. We will do everything to make diplomacy effective. But every day now is about defending our independence, our state, and our people. We must remember, it is the support of our army, all our defense and security forces, and our state that determines everything. I thank each and every one who does not forget that Ukraine's defense and resilience are paramount. I am grateful to all Ukrainian soldiers, every one of our units. I thank everyone who works for our defense and for our state. I thank all Ukrainians for every fundraiser for our Ukrainian army. We must remember, as long as the occupier is on our land, and as long as air raid sirens sound, we must defend Ukraine. Glory to Ukraine. It would be recalled that President Vladimir Putin, in a press conference held during the week in Moscow, said that he needed to speak directly with President Donald Trump over the details of the 30-day ceasefire proposed by the North America country, stating categorically that Russia supports the ceasefire proposal, but the details of the proposal needed to be clarified as to know what would happen to the Ukrainian troops that invaded the Russia-Kursk region last August and the ones among them that have been captured. President Donald Trump during the week raised alarm that the Ukrainian troops in the Kursk region have been encircled by Russian soldiers, and appealed to President Vladimir Putin to spare their lives. But President Putin replied and said that all the Ukrainian troops in the Kursk region should surrender and be spared. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, in a statement during a virtual meeting with the heads of European countries during the preceding week, said that Ukrainian troops are not encircled by Russia in the Kursk region, adding that President Vladimir Putin of Russia is lying about the true picture of what is going on in the Kursk region. At the end of the European leaders' meeting, the UK Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, said that the European leaders agreed to send peacekeeping troops to Ukraine, announcing that military chiefs from the European countries will meet this coming Thursday. We had reported that President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has listed and disclosed the 3 key points in the proposal the Ukrainian delegation submitted to the United States, US team, which included the transfer and release of prisoners, stoppage of bombings both on the sea and skies, and the release of women and children forcefully taken to Russia based on the command of President Vladimir Putin, when the Ukrainian delegates led by the head of the presidential office, Andriy Yermak, Foreign Minister, Andriy Sybiha, Defense Minister, Rustem Umerov, and military official, Pavlo Palitsa met in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia on Tuesday with the representatives of the US, which included the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, President Donald Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, and Trump's advisor, Mike Waltz. President Zelenskyy, in a statement on Tuesday after the meeting, praised and thanked the US for proposing 30-day ceasefire on all front lines. We had reported that more than 25 persons have been reportedly killed during the week in Ukraine since President Vladimir Putin of Russia scale up and double his offensive attacks on the neighboring European country, with President Donald Trump continuing during the week to block more US military aid to the troubled country and making statements seemingly capable of demoralizing Ukrainian troops and probably inciting the entire Ukrainian citizens against their president, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, just as reports indicated that in the last 3 days, Russian troops have advanced retake some territories in the Kursk region, and they are about encircling the thousands of Ukrainian troops who had last summer stormed and took over the Russia-Kursk region by surprise in anticipation to use the conquered Russia-Kursk region as leverage to be able to hold meaningful negotiations with Moscow in any peace talks. This, as unverified and unsubstantiated rumors have spread widely in the North America country, the US, that President Donald Trump was one of the US businessmen contracted in 1987 as Russia spy, with Alnur Musiev, the former Kazakhstan National Security Committee, KNB head and former Kazakh intelligence chief who served in the 6th Directorate in Moscow of the KGB, a Russian-language abbreviation for State Security Committee, which was the main internal security agency for the Soviet Union from 1954 until its breakup in 1991, insisting that recruiting Western businessmen was a top priority for Soviet intelligence. And Donald Trump was allegedly recruited by his department as a spy against the United States with a nickname, Krasnov. We had reported that President Vladimir Putin-led Russia apparently has taken advantage of the lapses coming from the United States, US, that has been its secret war rival since 1945, following the actions of President Donald Trump turning US back on Ukraine by thus stopping and blocking military aid and military intelligence to Ukraine, and obviously made Putin to launch massive drone, cruise and ballistic missile attacks on Ukraine, with some US citizens narrowly escaping deaths on Wednesday night when Russia struck a hotel with a ballistic missile that travels 5 times faster than the speed of sound, killing 4 persons and reportedly injured over 30 others at Kryvyi Rih city, with the Ukrainian military saying they were able to repel all other missiles but could not repel the ballistic airstrikes, according to BBC. This Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said that the France F-16 jets and Mirage aircrafts were used to defend the Ukrainian skies, adding that the France Mirage aircraft successfully intercepted Russia cruise missiles. We had reported that the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, in a written and video statement on Monday, has said that what Ukrainians need is a true and honest peace deal and not endless war, just as President Donald Trump of the US and one of the world's richest billionaires, Elon Musk, had continued to use their privileged office and position in the society to launch a terrorist-like media Cold War against the person of President Zelenskyy, apparently to weaken his zeal and cause public disaffection against the Ukrainian president by thus using dangerous negative communication styles of half-truth, manipulated facts, deliberate misrepresentation of facts, misinterpretation of words, spin logic, bullying, game-shaming, blaming, belittling, mockery, and trying to hold Ukraine ransom by blocking US military aid to the troubled country for a war. It appears Donald Trump is the first US president that kick-started it by thus. The Trump administration first approved the sale of Javelin anti-tanks missiles to Ukraine in December 2017, after civil unrest ensued in Ukraine in 2014 with a protest codenamed Revolution of Dignity, which ousted and forced into exile in Russia the then pro-Russia president, Viktor Fedorovich Yanukovych, on February 22, 2014, just a day after President Vladimir Putin mobilized troops and invaded Ukraine, succeeded in taking over Ukraine's territorial land of Crimea, an action the then US President Barack Obama retaliated by only placing sanctions on Russia assets for violating the constitutional rights of Ukraine. The 2017 action of Donald Trump was a step that former President Barack Obama never took, which Trump allies pointed to be a sign of Trump's toughness on Russia and good for US business, which giving Ukraine lethal weapons had been a red line for Obama, who feared that it could cause Russia to escalate conflict, which President Vladimir Putin-led Russia actually did, and Ukraine has been fighting Russian soldiers and Russia-backed armed separatists in its eastern provinces since 2014, shortly after Russia illegally occupied and annexed Crimea, in a war that has claimed approximately 13,000 lives and displaced 1.5 million people, according to the Ukrainian government before Volodymyr Zelenskyy became Ukrainian president in May 20, 2019 on the platform of Servant of the People political party, and before Zelenskyy became president, Putin violated 3 ceasefire peace deals under Donald Trump in January, February and March 2019, and as of December 2019, Ukrainian military reported a total of more than 70 ceasefire deals violated by Putin-led Russia, and during his inaugural speech on May 20, 2019, when Volodymyr Zelenskyy took office as President of Ukraine, he said his priority was a ceasefire in the Donbass, and also asserted that Crimea and Donbass are Ukrainian land, and that the people living in those regions are not strangers, they are ours, Ukrainians, truly. On December 9, 2019, the Russian President, Vladimir Putin, French President, Emmanuel Macron, German Chancellor, Angela Merkel and Ukrainian President, Volodymyr Zelenskyy met in person in Paris, France and agreed on a ceasefire and prisoners exchange, but, on same day, 3 Ukrainian soldiers were killed by a landmine by Russian-backed forces who violated the ceasefire 7 more times in December using BMP-1 armored vehicles, grenade launchers, heavy machine guns, and small arms. This, Ukrainian military recorded additional 47 ceasefire peace deals violations in 2020, more than 180 ceasefire peace deals violations in 2021 until February 24, 2022. President Vladimir Putin declared full-scale war on Ukraine, describing U.S. government, previous and present he referred to as Washington during his war declaration nationwide address, as an empire of liars. We had reported that President Donald Trump of the United States, U.S. may be trying to cause unnecessary confusion to the traditional way of war settlements which date back to the end of World War I in 1918 and World War II in 1945 when Germany, considered as the aggressor, was made to pay damages or reparation or the costs incurred by the U.S., Britain, France and the Soviet Union, which comprises Russia, Ukraine and 13 other republics, when Germany on August 1, 1914 mobilized troops from Berlin to support the defunct Austria-Hungary country, which included German-speaking Austrians, Magyars, Slavs, and Italians after the Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia on June 28, 1914, following the bombing and shooting to death the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to Austro-Hungarian throne, and his wife, Sophie, the Duchess of Hohenberg, by a suspected group of extremists from Serbia that wanted to increase Serbian power in the Balkans by breaking up the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the shooting specifically was carried out by a 19-year-old Gavrilo Princip. Russia came to the aid of Serbia, and with the support of other countries like Britain and France, Austria-Hungary was defeated after so many deaths, especially on the side of Serbia civilian populations. And at the end of the World War I, Germany was made to pay the damages and costs of war as the aggressor, and on September 1, 1939, Adolf Hitler of Germany, who is considered a nationalist extremist, on his apparent quest to expand Aryan race in Europe, invaded Poland, a border country whose people were considered inferior and powerless people, likely the same way Vladimir Putin of Russia may have seen Ukrainians. The action of Adolf Hitler forced Britain, France, U.S., and the Soviet Union to declare war on Germany on September 3, 1939, and they defeated Germany at the end of the World War II in 1945 after Adolf Hitler and his top generals refused to surrender and reportedly committed suicides inside their underground bunkers after millions of deaths, especially Jews. And in order to make Germany unable to attack another country again, Britain, France and US occupied West Germany, including West Berlin, for years with capitalist economy system, and at the same time, the Soviet Union occupied East Germany, including East Berlin, with communist economy system, and Germany, considered as the aggressor, was again made to pay the damages or the costs of the World War II, which Germany has struggled to pay up to 2010, and it may be clearer that no victim of World War I, Serbia and World War II, Poland was apparently made to pay debts or sign economic deals for the costs incurred by the countries that came to their aid. This may justify the action of Donald Trump requesting Ukraine to sign rare earth minerals deal with the US as criminally exploitative demand. and Donald Trump pushing the narratives that Europe will get their money back and US will not get its money back is seemly and half-truths made to mislead the public, like President Emmanuel Macron of France recently corrected Donald Trump at the Oval Office that Europe is not getting the money back from Ukraine, that Russia is the one to pay them back the money, most especially from the seized Russia assets in Europe and the US under the immediate past. President Joe Biden seized billions of dollars of Russia assets confiscated to finance US aid to Ukraine. Interestingly, Vladimir Putin of Russia, who is also considered as a nationalist extremist like Adolf Hitler of Germany, on February 24, 2022 in a world news broadcast, made it very clear that he decided to declare special military operations in Ukraine because of that for many years, the US tried to expand its powers, stressing, he does not have problem with Europe or NATO, saying, NATO is the US foreign policy used by the North America to try to conquer Russia by thus enlisting some other countries that made up the defunct Soviet Union into NATO, and he would never allow US to assemble its military infrastructures in Ukraine, its closest neighboring country. Hence he decided to go after the pro-US Ukrainian politicians and government officials by demilitarizing Ukraine and reclaiming it as an independent territory he said was once part of Russia, adding that he mobilized Russia troops to invade and reclaim parts of Ukraine, which included Crimea, in 2014 in support of Russia-speaking people in Donbas he said was suffering humiliation and genocide attacked by Kyiv government for many years, which President Volodymyr Zelenskyy in several occasions has accused Putin of always sponsoring and organizing terrorists to kill Ukrainians. We had reported that the Ukrainian President, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, has told United States, US President Donald Trump that Ukrainians don't need just a ceasefire from President Vladimir Putin-led Russia, but a complete end to the war, which Ukraine's security will be guaranteed from further or future invasions from the neighboring rival European country, adding that he was in the United States to sign rare earth mineral deals as drafted by both countries' teams, which included Ukraine's security guarantee, making this statement at the Oval Office on Friday afternoon according to America local time, when the meeting went smoothly, friendly and calmly for more than 35 minutes until the US Vice President, J.D. Vance, interrupted and brought in U.S. internal political matters into the Russia-Ukraine issue by thus condemning the administration of the immediate past President of the U.S., Joe Biden, for always appearing before the press to accuse Putin and Russia of bringing destructions to Ukraine without an act of diplomacy to peace path, which he said the current president, Donald Trump, is trying to achieve. And the Ukrainian President, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, quickly responded and asked the US Vice President J.D. Vance what kind of diplomacy is he talking about, reminding the Vice President that Putin has been destroying lives in Ukraine for years during the era of previous presidents before Joe Biden, including 2014 when Russia took over Crimea to 2022 and 2019 during the first tenure of President Donald Trump when he signed a ceasefire peace deal with Putin, but the Russia president broke the ceasefire and continued to destroy lives in Ukraine. Obviously and apparently annoyed, Vice President J.D. responded by accusing the visiting Zelenskyy of coming to the Oval Office to disrespect U.S. sitting president in his office, adding that no president in the world has ever done that before in the Oval Office. The full length of the meeting video footage and the Fox News interview with Zelenskyy shortly after the Oval Office meeting ended with heated arguments, and series of crosstalks are published in full in our audio and video versions of this news reportage. We had reported that, contrary to media speculations that the embattled Ukraine has reached an agreement with the United States, US-led President Donald Trump on the rare earth minerals deal required as exchange or economic benefits for the US to continue to assist the war-torn Ukraine with military aid against ongoing President Vladimir Putin-led Russia military destructions and bring peace to the country. The Ukrainian President, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, in a video press release on Wednesday night debunks the speculations, saying, the US and the Ukrainian teams have been working together in preparation for the negotiations on the terms of the economic deal this coming Friday in the US, signaling, no agreement has been reached yet. We had reported that the United States President, Donald Trump, has said that if the war in Ukraine is not stopped now, it could lead or escalate to World War III, with the visiting French President, Emmanuel Macron, insisting that Russia is the aggressor of the war, hence Russia must pay damages as part of the negotiations for the peace deal. But the US, in another meeting at the United Nations General Assembly on Monday, joined Russia to vote against a resolution condemning Russia over the war in Ukraine. We had reported that, following the public criticism of President Donald Trump of the United States that the Ukrainian President, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, is a man who has lost touch with his people and a dictator who refused to conduct election for new leader to take over the affairs of the country, Zelenskyy, while asked if he could resign by a journalist at a press conference organized to mark the third-year anniversary of war in Ukraine, says he would do that if it would bring peace to Ukraine, and he's ready to do that as exchange for Ukraine to be enlisted as a member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. We had earlier reported that despite the medical condition that he's under, the high flow of oxygen in the hospital over double pneumonia, Pope Francis on Sunday, on the eve of the third-year anniversary of the war in Ukraine launched by President Vladimir Putin-led Russia government, called on everyone in the world to remember victims of the war in Ukraine, describing the war, which started on February 24, 2022, as painful, shameful for all humanity. Previously, we reported that the Ukrainian President, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, has continued his phone conversations with world leaders with a video and written press statement on Saturday saying that the world leaders must ensure that the Russian President, Vladimir Putin, is not allowed to deceive the world again, insisting that Putin has used Russian army, intelligence services and mercenaries over 30 years to bring deaths to America, Europe, Africa, Middle East, Syria. This, Zelenskyy stated after he began special defense campaign with phone conversations with world leaders following strained relationship with one of the countries that has majorly assisted Ukraine in its defense against Russia since 2022 when the war began, United States, US President Donald Trump, who threatened to stop military aid to Ukraine, claiming that Ukraine started the war it knows it cannot win, calling President Volodymyr Zelenskyy a modestly successful comedian and a dictator that deceived the immediate past US President, Joe Biden, to commit over $350 billion of US taxpayers' money on a war the North America country will not get any profit in return, with Ukrainian President accusing Donald Trump of disinformation and saying that Putin-led Russia has intensified attacks and launched massive bomb destructions on Ukraine's cities and villages during the week of Donald Trump's outburst.
Osasua Radio, bringing you the news in a more digital way.